History seems to have a clear verdict on American tanks in World War II. The M4 Sherman, a death trap. A Ronson that lit up with one hit. And when it went up against the German Panther, well, it was a lamb to the slaughter. The Panther was a beast of technology. Its thick, sloped armor was incredibly tough to crack from the front, and its powerful, high-velocity 75mm gun could knock out a Sherman from distances where the Sherman couldn't hope to reply. On paper, any fight between these two should have been suicide for the American crew. But what if that picture isn't quite right? What if, in a series of overlooked battles and secret army tests, this supposedly inferior tank didn't just hold its own, it actually dominated Germany's finest? This is the story of how America's worst tank, using a mix of clever tactics, overwhelming numbers, and surprising strengths, humiliated the pride of the Panzerwaffe. The secret wasn't about building a better tank. It was about fighting a smarter war. To really get the scale of what the Americans pulled off, you have to appreciate the monster they were facing. The Panzerkampfwagen V, the Panther, was arguably the most formidable medium tank of the war. Rushed into service for the Battle of Kursk in 1943, it was Germany's answer to the Soviet T-34, and it packed all the lessons they had learned on the brutal Eastern Front. Its design was a masterpiece of engineering theory. Weighing nearly 45 tons, it was really more of a heavy tank. Its most intimidating feature was its 80mm of frontal armor sloped back at a steep 55-degree angle. This clever design dramatically increased its effective thickness, meaning most Allied anti-tank rounds would just skip harmlessly off its front plate. And its gun, the 75mm WK-42, was a genuine terror. It was a high-velocity sniper designed to kill from a safe distance. It struck fear in Allied tankers long before one ever rumbled into view. On paper, it was almost perfect. But wars aren't fought on paper. And then, you have the M4 Sherman. Next to the Panther, it looked almost old-fashioned. At around 33 tons, it was smaller, and its thinner, mostly vertical armor offered a lot less protection. Its standard 75mm gun was a low-velocity weapon, really designed to support infantry by lobbing high-explosive shells at machine gun nests. It was this gun that gave the Sherman its bad reputation in a tank-on-tank fight. Grim battlefield reports confirmed that the Sherman's standard 75mm gun was almost useless against a Panther's sloped front glasses at typical combat ranges. Even the upgraded 76mm gun, which started showing up in late 1944, had trouble. With standard ammunition, it had to get dangerously close to have a real chance of penetrating the Panther's thickest frontal armor. While special high-velocity ammunition, HVAP, was more effective, it was always in short supply. Faced with these facts, the legend of the death trap Sherman seems completely fair. It looked like the Americans had brought a knife to a gunfight. So how on earth did this underdog turn the tables? So, American commanders knew they were in a tough spot. They saw the test data and they read the after-action reports. But their solution wasn't to just build a Panther killer and rush it to the front. Instead, they leaned into a totally different way of thinking about war. The American secret weapon wasn't one single piece of gear. It was a three-part strategy the German war machine just couldn't handle. Mass production, smarter tactics, and good old-fashioned reliability. First, there was the jaw-dropping power of American industry. While Germany built around 6,000 Panthers in the entire war, the United States churned out nearly 50,000 Shermans. A grim joke on the front lines was that if a Panther killed 10 Shermans, the Americans always had an 11th. It was a mathematical reality. Plus, American recovery crews worked tirelessly to drag damaged Shermans off the battlefield, repair them, and get them back in the fight. A broken-down Panther, with its complicated design and lack of spare parts, was often lost for good. Second, and maybe even more important, was tactics. The U.S. Army didn't even plan for tanks to be the main anti-tank weapon. That job was for specialized tank destroyer units. But on the messy battlefields of France, Sherman crews figured out how to hunt Panthers themselves. They knew they couldn't win a head-on slugging match, so they used the Sherman's key advantages: speed, agility, and a fast-rotating turret. A Sherman's turret could spin a full 360 degrees in about 15 seconds. A Panther's could be just as fast, but only if the engine was revving high. At idle, it was painfully slow. So American tankers worked in wolf packs. One or two Shermans would get the Panther's attention, maybe even blind it with smoke, while others sped around to hit its much thinner side and rear armor. It was a deadly dance, and the Sherman was the nimbler dancer. The third piece was reliability. The Panther was a maintenance nightmare. Rushed into production, it was full of mechanical gremlins, especially in its transmission and final drive, which were not built to handle its immense weight. At its debut battle, most Panther losses were from mechanical failure, not enemy action. Post-war French Army tests on captured Panthers revealed some could suffer catastrophic final drive failures in as little as 150 kilometers. The Sherman, by contrast, was a workhorse. Its simple, rugged design just worked. You can see it in the operational readiness rates. It wasn't uncommon for Panther units to have only 35 to 40% of their tanks ready for action on any given day. For Sherman units, that number was often 70 to 80%, or even higher. A Panther sitting in a workshop isn't a threat. Before we get to the ultimate battlefield humiliation, where all these factors collided in a spectacular clash of steel and strategy, if you're finding this deep dive into military history fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. And nowhere did all of this come together more spectacularly than in the quiet fields of Arracourt, France, in September 1944. This was the scene of one of the largest tank battles on the Western Front, a fight that should have been a German victory but instead became a textbook example of American armored warfare. The German 5th Panzer Army, armed with a powerful force of elite Panther tanks, launched a huge counterattack against General Patton's 3rd Army. They ran straight into the U.S. 4th Armored Division, equipped mainly with the inferior M4 Sherman. The Germans had the better tanks on paper, but the Americans had better training, better coordination, and a leader in Lieutenant Colonel Crichton Abrams, yes, that Abrams, who knew exactly how to play to his strengths. The battle kicked off on September 19th in a thick morning fog. The Germans, advancing with poor reconnaissance, were essentially blind. The Americans used the fog as a cloak and lay in ambush. The battles that followed were a masterclass in Sherman tactics. Picture a scene playing out in the mist, a column of German Panthers trying to find their way forward, only to be ambushed by concealed Shermans. In one such engagement, as the surprised German column tried to pull back, another group of Shermans used their speed to race to a ridgeline, getting a perfect flanking position on the exposed side armor of several Panthers. Within minutes, The mighty German tanks were turned into burning wrecks, with the Americans slipping away unscathed. This kind of scene repeated itself throughout the Battle of Arracourt. American crews, working with artillery and air support, consistently outmaneuvered and outfought their technologically superior foe. When the dust settled, the numbers were staggering. Estimates show the 5th Panzer Army lost over 86 tanks, with some figures putting total German armored vehicle losses at over 200. The 4th Armored Division lost only around 25 tanks and 7 tank destroyers. It was a crushing defeat for the Panzerwaffe, and it proved that the quality of the crew and their tactics could absolutely overcome a technological disadvantage. So, was the M4 Sherman a death trap? If you were a crew that tried to fight a Panther head-on, it certainly could be. But that misses the entire point. War isn't a one-on-one duel. It's a massive, complicated machine of logistics. Introduction and tactics. The Sherman was the perfect tank for the winning American war philosophy. Good enough was better than waiting for perfect. It was reliable, it could be produced in enormous quantities, and it was flexible enough to be devastating when used with smart tactics. The Panther, for all its individual power, was the product of a flawed philosophy that chased weapon perfection at the expense of strategic reality. It was too complex, too unreliable. And ultimately, its numbers were never going to be enough to change the strategic outcome of the war. So what really makes a tank the best? Is it the thickness of its armor or the power of its gun? Or is it the ability to be there on the battlefield, in the right place at the right time, to win the day and win the war? The fields of Arracourt provided a definitive answer.